beautiful humans. Welcome to the Human Beauty Movement podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Norman. Throughout my life, I've been a lover and a seeker of all things beauty, from art and dance to cosmetics and fashion to music and nature. But through my own personal journey, I've come to discover what I believe is the most beautiful thing in the universe, the beauty of the human soul. On this podcast, I sit down with beautiful humans from all corners of the globe and all walks of life to learn how they are living their own unique soul beauty out loud. You'll hear from game changers, rebels with great causes, sages, odds beaters, and valiant warriors who fall down 7 times and get up 8. This is the podcast where abundant energy flows and supreme wisdom is bestowed. Get ready to enjoy the inspiration. So whenever I'm asked about why I started the Human Beauty Movement, my answer is pretty simple. I believe that no matter who you are, you matter. Yet this belief is often contrasted by what I saw play out in media and in culture, particularly in fashion, beauty, and modeling industries. Fortunately, things are changing. Here to join me for a conversation on the beauty of diverse representation is Katie Willcox. Katie is the founder of Natural Model Management, and she's also the author of Healthy is the New Skinny, Your Guide to Self-Love in a Picture-Perfect World. Katie has been a top plus-size model for 15 years, and boy, does she have stories. All too often, Katie saw the ugly side of beauty, and she wanted to change things for the better. Her mission is to promote health and happiness within the modeling industry and to help everyone recognize the beauty of their own natural body shape and size. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me all the way from Cancun, Mexico today.
At a cute little coffee spot. So if you hear coffee making in the background,
Yes.
I'm having a cappuccino. We're just vibing over here.
Love it. Lovely. Hopefully you'll get some good tequila later on. But
yeah, exactly.
before that, I would love for you to dial it back to those early days of what it was like when you first started out as a model.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it was 2002 and everything wasn't even digital yet, so it was still film cameras. So there was a lot of men and crews. There wasn't women yet, so it'd be like male hair and makeup, male stylists, male photographers. The crew was definitely heavily male, and the industry at that point was like Victoria's Secret, America's Next Top Model, like height of everything. So it was like the most toxic culture for girls and women ever at that point.
And
So
I just wanted to tell you, I was actually working for Victoria's Secret catalog back in the year. I think it was 1999 or something like that when I worked for Victoria's Secret catalog. So
okay.
Go on.
So I also, let me just say, I would order from Victoria's Secret catalog, obviously. And I would always be shocked when I got the clothes because I'd be like, these do not look anything like the pants that Adriana Lima had on. Like they literally don't even look like this at all. And
you're exactly right.
High waters and the belt is different, but I had no idea that that's the game. It is so funny, like having those memories of being like, this isn't making sense, I don't understand this, and then getting into the industry. So I was a competitive volleyball player and was in Seattle for a volleyball tournament, and then went into an agency for an open call, and they was like, oh, you'd be perfect for plus size. So that's when I first heard about it, and I think that was like when it first started in the market of like, it was a size 0-2 was considered standard. And so I, at a size 10, 12, like athlete, was considered plus size. And so people were really like offended by that, being like, how could you be called plus size? And we heard that for years and years and years and years. Like it just like people could not put their head around it because it was so distorted to reality. Like in reality, a size 10 is not even remotely close to plus size. In fact, I'm a perfect weight for my height. I have more muscle mass than the average. Like go get my body scan at the doctor. I'm above average in health. And so you're like, so what would that say if in order to be a straight size model, my only other option, I would have had to lose 60 pounds Like that was the reality at the time. You either were a small frame and could starve yourself down small enough, or you then had to gain weight to be a size 14 sample. So when I started, they were like, hey, love your look. If you can get a little bit bigger, that'd be perfect. And I was like, well, I can't lose 60 pounds. And then I naturally gained 30 pounds going to college and eating pizza at 3 in the morning and like gained the freshman 30. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like I stopped playing sports, all of that happened. And then I started working a lot. But that's when it kind of set in. We were like, oh, wait, no, this doesn't feel good. In theory, we think that validation will feel good. Like, oh, as long as I'm working. I was like, that's not good for my body. It was too much for my frame and it wasn't healthy. And so I had the opposite experience where instead of getting rewarded for under eating or, reaching a small sample size, I kind of got rewarded for being a bigger sample size than my natural size should be. And really thinking like your livelihood depends on what your hip measurement is the weirdest, most unhealthy thing you can do to a young person, to anyone, but especially a teenage girls. And that's what was happening. Didn't matter if it was on the small side or if you came in as a curve model, you were really like the redheaded stepchild of the industry. It's like what we say, like it was just not even looked at as like a real model. It was like, oh, you're the plus size model. And anytime I would go to shoots, it would be like, if it was a group shot, it would be 4 straight size girls with cute outfits, like perfectly styled, good makeup. And then there'd be just me, like kind of like in the back in like some ugly outfit. And like, like they just have to throw it in. And it started with juniors and then it's like worked its way up into women's. But what we see now is really the shift to social media is the demand from plus size women who really changed the whole industry, not just the plus size industry, but their vocalization of being like, I want to see an actual woman that looks like me. This is not plus size. We don't care what you want to call it. This is not plus size. We want to see size 18s, 20s. That's plus size. So their demand to their clients, and they listened. So when that happened, what it did is it created a big divide where you got your standard 02, and then you've got an 18, and now they're putting them next to each other. And it's too big of a gap. It's too extreme for the public to be able to process that because one was held as ideal for so long. And then this is a new ideal, but just a completely like you're either this box or this box when most people are neither of those. Yeah. And we're all in the middle, like we said, like of the spectrum of size and beauty and all those things. So it's been a wild ride to see how it started and being able to have been in it when it started and seeing the evolution and the progression of where it's going. And I don't know if it's just like, we always joke and say like, I'm a little bit psychic because I know exactly where the shift is going to happen and I know what it is. And I've been right every single time as far as like going out and finding what I know the market's going to do before it happens. And then having that when the shift happens where clients can go, oh, great, we need this. So it started with being like, okay, it's going to go to curve models. So size 14s were the samples, getting that. Then it's going to go larger than that. So we have fuller sizes. Now the big, I've been telling everyone for years and they're like, you called it. I'm like, it's going to go to mid-size. So because they're extremes, like we talked about, people really want to see just like average size. So when we're looking at women in size, the real size spectrum is a 0 to a 30, not a 0 to a 14, which is what's available in stores. And what's shocking about that is if you're looking at what's the average size of women in the United States, it's a size 16 at 5'4". So the average size woman can't even fit the mainstream brand size range, which economically makes no sense. And we haven't seen any progress in terms of those adjustments to cater to the market and to cater to women. It's still being put on women to change their bodies to fit the clothes. And that's my prediction in the future. You can say you heard it here. That's going to change. Consumers are going to start driving that market on all size. They don't want division. It doesn't matter if you're a size 18 or you're a size 6 or you're a 10 or you're a 2. Women are now going, we just all want to be the same. We don't want the division. We don't have the elitism and the superiority complex of the beauty ideal like we did in the Victoria's Secret time. That's how it was so successful. That's kind of been diminished. And so now we really want like equality. We want our friends to feel good and we want all women to like feel fabulous and be able to shop and enjoy their beauty and expression. So it's been a wild ride from like beginning to middle to where we're at, and the future where we're going, I think is going to be even better.
Amazing. And I know that you had started this initiative, which is Healthy is the New Skinny, because we were finding how damaging or how much harm was being done by traditional models, as you were saying, size 0, size 2. Girls that were in that mid level were not necessarily fitting here or there. And so they were either instructed, well, you got to lose 30 pounds, which is insane. Like for
Yeah.
anybody, any young girl, 16 years old, to be told, well, you got to lose 30 pounds. I
Yeah.
remember even when I was living in New York and somebody suggested I go for modeling, which to me blew my mind because I never felt pretty looking like how I looked and being only 5'2". And then when I went in, they said, well, you really need to lose at least 10, 15 pounds. And at 5'2", at the time I was 103 pounds. So like to get down to like 85 pounds
Like a
was
child.
really, that would have been very, very damaging to my health. And the only time that I came close was when I went through this massive depression. I was, going through a divorce at the time and I stopped eating. And then I lost weight. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, I look good. This is sick. It's like I was literally sick from depression and I was sick and thinking that that's how my body should have been. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should just stay depressed. Maybe I should just stop eating. And so the mental and the emotional unwellness that comes from this whole idea of identity being valued as being something that you just are not naturally supposed to be like is
And it's a reward system.
Mhm.
So it's not just that of like, oh, you should lose 30 pounds. Like if there wasn't a major reward for that, no one would do it. You'd be like, no way, I'm not doing that. That's stupid.
Mhm.
But because they brainwash girls from the time they're little with this imaging and then the messaging that comes with the beauty ideal, and this is what we help girls really understand in some workshops. We'll say, okay, let's write down on this board, what does the perfect woman look like? Like, let's name everything we can think of. And it's literally a list of like 100 things. So you're going, okay, what do you get if you have all of these? What do you get? Why do people strive so hard to have it? Why do we spend so much to have it? What do we promise by the pursuit of these things? And that's the core message is it's happiness, love, attention, money. Guys will like you. You'll be popular. You'll have followers. Your life is easier. You're in control. That's all the messaging that's programmed through those images. That's the core desire of what women and girls really want, especially living in a patriarchal society. Is like you can be like, you want to have freedom to walk around the street in your underwear and feel fabulous like Victoria's Secret. And we're going, now put that into the real world. The social media is where girls express that. But you can't do that in real life. You can't just walk down the street in your underwear and be safe. So we have this like fantasy, what's portrayed of like a woman's desires, and they are pulling from the things that we wish we could have and we really wish we could be. And then they're saying, here's how you get it. And by being so young and vulnerable to believe those things, and you work with someone who's like, all you have to do is lose 30 pounds, you get to be a Victoria's Secret model. Like those girls have they have no chance. None of us did. That's why we all did horrible things to our bodies and the pursuit of this stuff, because really we were lacking so much internally. And I think collectively, when we stop to look at that, how we all were feeling and how much we were not receiving of our own happiness, our own fulfillment, our own safety, our own like self-control, self-fulfillment. That's shocking when you're like, this has been the work that I feel like our generation has done to be the women we are right now. And it's the tipping point because the daughters we're raising are going to be very different. But we almost had to be like we've been talking about, you almost had to go through all of that to have this awareness and this understanding of how misled we were in the pursuit of the things that we get to decide if we have or not. No one else gets to give us permission for those things, and our bodies are not the determining factor of who's allowed to have those things. So it's I think it's a power conversation, which I love. But I would love to hear from you. What were like your marketing meetings like in some of your jobs? Like, did you have characters of like what you were selling the girl? Like, she's like a free, she's cool. Like, what was it like? I'd love to hear it.
Well, what was fascinating is that, early on, it was very much about like who is Victoria's Secret. There was a whole almost booklet put together on, she was in college, she dated the quarterback, and so you get this persona that's fabricated in the mind, but, she, aspired. It's kind of like the whole Ralph Lauren thing. It's like be it until you become it or fake it till you make it. Creates this whole world of polo. Charles Revson said, beauty is hope in a jar. What we're selling is hope in a jar. And so it's like that fantasy, that aspiration of a bigger life, a better life that is not really truly attainable, but that's keeping us all wanting. And that's where the money goes. It's like spending, spending, spending to get to this place that you never actually will be able to attain. And so, yeah, there was a certain amount of illusion and theater that would go into it all. There was so much time and involvement that would go into just creating, I would almost say, like, because of the way that the merchandising and the stores would be set up, we would literally create that in the office space and have these fantasy worlds built out so that we could get into the emotion and what it was like to be in like the Christmas catalog or what have you. And so, from a design standpoint and from an artistic standpoint, there is this expression of beauty and of, just like this kind of pushing the envelope in innovation. And so, from that perspective, I think that it was enjoyable. It was wonderful and it was very creative. But then when you think about it, I think that the thing that we never, or we just kind of put up with, we tolerated because it was so successful, is what it did to the consumer on the other side. Yes, she might have felt like, oh, I'm tapping into this aspiration of beauty, but what was that divide? How did we really feel? Nobody really talked about that from a mental health perspective. We always just talked about, like, what was going to be the next successful campaign and how gorgeous it was. But there was this famous study by Glamour magazine early on because they had gotten so much feedback and so much flack about, oh, your models on your covers, they're so unobtainable. Why don't you put regular sized women? Why don't you put regular looking people on your covers? And at one point they did, and it was the worst selling magazine ever. And so they were like, see, we told you, like,
Yeah.
nobody wants that.
And
And
that's,
truly, we were
I can add to
brainwashed
that
into,
too.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, at that time, the market wasn't ready for it. And it's kind of like we would say one thing, but our behavior, our purchasing would tell a different story. And so what's really the thing that is actually going to be driving the market? It's what we feel inside. And so now that things are shifting, culture is definitely shifting. And it's because there's less clout, with the mega companies, and it's more democratic. We do see personalities overriding, and the success of the common person being able to come and be anything. And all it takes is self-confidence and this feeling that they can and they will, and they'll have this passion and drive for what they're doing. And so hence the rise of the
Yeah.
influencer, right?
But I feel like the influencer, so I think it's an ever evolving thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because of face tuning apps and Photoshop apps that made what models received for these magazines so available to everyone,
Yeah.
like it was created this monster of like, oh, anyone can Photoshop themselves to have a different body, to have a different face, to have different hair, to have different eye color, and create these complete false personas that we see that are influencers and influencing.
And isn't that
And
ironic that just what we were fighting against is what the behavior has become at the individual level?
yes, it's so fascinating to explore because I always had these same questions where there was one specific plus size brand that we shot here in Cancun one time actually, and they sold to very large women. So I was a size 6 at the time. And the dresses are just like, they call them muumuus. That's actually what they're called. They're like those long, just straight dresses on the beach. And I was like, why do you guys use my size if you sell to like women who are size 20 and up, And they're like, oh, well, we market tested it and we used a size 18 and we used you and you outsold by like 80%. And I was like, that is fascinating. So I think that comes back to like that conversation about the aspirational versus the attainable. Like you don't really, and this is from a marketing perspective, to be like, well, how attainable are you wanting to sell? Because if it's not aspirational, even in the real sense, like Dove is another great example. When Dove came on the scene, I was so excited because I was like, oh, finally a client that'll use me, like great. And they're like, no, you're too pretty. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, no, they want like real women. And I was like, what does that? I don't get that. And they're like, yeah, you're not like real enough. But yet the breakdowns that they would put out for their castings were like so specific. It was like, no, tattoos, not tattoos. You can't have tattoos. You can't have this, like in the beginning. So it was a very curated vision of what a real woman is, which is she's not attractive. This is based off of their vision of how are we going to relate to moms. And like, this is what it is. The marketing is when you break it down. Mm-hmm. And you have to look at it. And this is what I would teach in my courses, because I'm like, at the end of the day, what does all the messaging that Dove has, which is wonderful. I love their messaging. I love their initiatives. They help girls. But what does any of that have to do with soap and deodorant and shampoo and lotion? Mm-hmm. Absolutely effing nothing. So what would be the reason for it is because they're directly targeting a very specific consumer group, which is the women in the household with the moms who buy those products for their home. They're trying to create a brand loyalty. So when they go shop, they're picking their brand. And like, once I recognized that, I was like, wow, that's so smart and tricky. I was like, it's not good or bad, because they are doing good things. They are having good messaging, but it still doesn't mean that it's fully authentic. It's still marketing with the agenda to sell. So just recognizing things for what they are. Do we want better marketing? Yes. But does it have anything to do with products that they're selling? No. And the company that owns Dove, which is Unilever, their other number one brand is Axe. So at the same time, Dove was coming out with these like, we love women, like their other company was having this marketing that was doing worse harm to women by having this chauvinistic, ridiculous branding towards men. So you're like, how the two go together. Like, that's what's so fun when you actually take the personal side out of this. And that's what my book is about, is to say beauty and body image and media marketing, you have to switch it out of the emotional brain and into your rational brain, because you can really make a lot of progress intellectually if you're willing to ask the questions of like, why do I think this way? How is this box connected to this box? And then you're like, they got me. And so I teach my daughter this now too. So when we go to the grocery store, she's like, Mom, are they tricking me? I go, what do you think? So they'll put, cartoon characters on stuff, and she'll be like, Mom, I want this juice. And I'm like, you don't even like that kind of juice. You're not going to like it. She's like, I am. I want it just because of the character. Mm-hmm. And so I taught her, I go, okay, I'm going to teach you something right now. I was like, they're tricking you. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, they're putting it in this princess bottle because they know that you're going to like it and want to buy it. And I promise you're not going to like it. And I go, so you get one treat. If you choose this, that's fine. But if you don't like it, you don't get to have another one. And you got tricked. And that's just the way it goes. So she got it. She didn't like it. And from that point on, she's always like, Mom, they're tricking me. And I'm like, I told you, you're not going to like that one. I'll tell you the flavors you're going to like, but you won't like that one. So she's recognizing it younger to be like, oh yeah, that is a trick. And so I think that's what we're looking at, is where like, it really was a bait and switch system of, we're going to sell you cheap, poorly made products that we pay professionals to photograph and make look amazing and beautiful people. And they're altered and pinned and photoshopped and presented in a way that looks amazing. That's not what you get. And we're going to convince you that you're the problem, so that when that product shows up and it looks like shit, because that's what it actually was to begin with, you're going to think there's something wrong with you. And the system will keep thriving, even though they don't have to have goods that are quality. So that was the shift that happened in the 50s, and it went from a needs to a want system. So with marketing in the 50s, it was all about durability and how things coming off of like people coming back from war and all of the, industrial revolution. It was like, these pantyhose, you can wear them for 10 years, like one set of pantyhose. Like, it was all about like functionality of products and how to sell it. Like, this power window goes up and down, and they would like show that. And they realized, it was Edward Bernays, who was the first person to create public relations in New York, who realized that you could partner celebrities with brands and put it on the movie, and it would go through the roof, and you don't have to sell good quality. You just have to make people want it. And so understanding the needs to the wants, like that happens to me all the time. It's psychology. I will online shop. I love it. And sometimes I just put shit in the cart, and then I'm like, nope, deleting it. But I felt better that I like put stuff in the cart, and I don't need it, but I want it. So I have to be conscious of like, why am I wanting this? How is this soothing emotion right now? Like, it's very complex. And I think that for women, shopping is an outlet for emotional things. And we love visual. Like, I love seeing colors and patterns. I love just walking around a store. Like, that's the thing with men. Like, they hate that. Like, they're like, oh my God. And they ruin your shopping experience at Target. You're like, just go. You're going to ruin this for me. I just want to walk around. Like, there's something therapeutic about it in a lot of ways. And I've been really conscious as of late, being like, what is this? Again, what am I getting from this? Because it makes me feel better momentarily, but not long term. So like, there's psychology of that wrapped into all of this retail consumerism stuff too. That is like the next phase of understanding, once you get past the like aspirational of like, I just want everyone to think I'm cool. Like, I think that's the younger woman thing. And then as you get into your like later 30s, 40s, it's more of like, you don't give a shit about that, but yet there's still a connection to it that is self-soothing, or it has been for me, that I'm like kind of exploring now too. That's pretty interesting. But there's so much psychology in all of it, whether it's marketing, body image. And then going into like your personal upbringing and childhood and all of that, it's very complex. I like when people are willing to explore the complexities and ask questions versus the like look in the mirror and say how much you love yourself. I'm all here. I'm here for affirmations too. But like, if you're not doing the other work, it's just a joke. Like, you have to be doing the work to figure out the answers as you're challenging them by looking in the mirror and saying, no, you know what? I do look effing good today. Like, nope, that negative voice isn't going to work. Like, you're not tricking me. Like, I know how this process is. And you're actually connecting all those dots. So that's something that I just find super fascinating and love to explore like it continually.
Amazing, amazing. So, when you started natural model management back in 2011, what was the real impetus behind that? Like, you had been a model yourself, and then all of a sudden it's like, there's so many things that you could have done. It's like, why did you decide to start your own modeling agency?
Yeah, it was, well, I tried to get the other agencies I was with to care more about plus size, and they just didn't have a passion for it at all. It was like, oh, if we get a client, great, but they didn't actively go try to find models. And I would see girls all the time, and I'm like, there's so many girls that can be doing this, and it's such a wonderful opportunity if you have a healthy experience doing it. Like, it can be change your life for good. And so I would try to bring that to them to be like, oh, I could scout, I could do this. And then I was like, why am I doing all of that for people that don't really care about it? If I'm the one that's passionate about it and I'm the one wanting to do it, why wouldn't I just create it for myself? And so, yeah, and obviously I was young, I was 25, so I was naive as hell too. And it's great because like I needed that in order to take on all of this. I had no idea like what would come with it or how, as it grew, like, it gets more and more complex as things get bigger and bigger. But it was just an idea where I knew there were other girls like me. And if I could fill the void of making sure that clients had an option to book different sizes, then they couldn't have the excuse anymore of like, well, agencies won't have girls those sizes, clients don't book them. And clients will say, well, we can't book those models because agencies don't even have them. So I was like, if you build it, they will come. So we built it, and that's exactly what happened. Is the market shifted right as we thought it would, and it started going that direction. So it's just never stopped since then, which is really wild.
Yeah, it seems like your first point of differentiation was in plus size or curvy girl. I know that there are a number of different ways that people speak about girls that are normal, so like average, and then, more of the everyday type person. And then you also branched out into other kinds of diversity too. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so for me, I've always had diverse friends, and I would talk to them and be like, I don't understand like why I'm being cast in the industry as the ethnic model and I'm Caucasian. So I'm like, how am I like the ethnic one in the group? Like, something's off. And I was able to recognize that. And it wasn't until I got on the side of like the agent side to see the breakdowns. And this was back in the day where it would specifically say like African American light skin curly hair or mixed light skin curly hair. So it was like very specific of the type of African American models that were being allowed to be seen. And they were all like mulatto with, a different curl texture to their hair. That was a bigger curl texture. You weren't seeing tight curl textures or afros or dark tones. And in same thing with Asian models, it's like you would get one on the board, maybe two. And that was like, oh, we met our quota. And I think that's how people really looked at it, where they were like, oh, well, we have our 3 Black models, so we're good. And when you look at that, you're like, nobody would ever say that about, oh, well, we have enough white models, we're good. So it was such a bias that we'd be like, you just wouldn't even think to say that. It's like that's the default was Caucasian, and then everything else was a box that could be checked. And I just didn't see it that way. I was like, no, if I come across someone who's stunning, who's going to photograph like a model, it doesn't matter how many other models that are the same race that I have. They're their own unique individual person, just like any other model. And I never saw it that way. So I really loved the way that it looked on my board. And I loved, like, it inspired me to, when I see beauty, like Aram is one of our models, and she's a dark tone, and she has is a gap in her teeth, and she's just like the most beautiful human being. Also, she's like an angel on this earth. I always brag about her, but she's so different. Her beauty's so different from mine that I'm like enamored by it, because I'm like, it's so different from mine that like I don't see myself in her at all. And yet I love looking at her images. I love the way her skin photographs. I love her smile. Like I love studying and looking at her photos. And I think there was this idea that unless someone can see themselves in someone else or aspire to be someone else, then they can't be inspired by a photo.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's changing too, where women are now being, as we've found more self-love in our own selves, we're actually seeing and appreciating diverse beauty in others that are different from us.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, oh, instead of critiquing it or putting it down because it's different, we're actually like, wow, like I love her look. Like she's so gorgeous. I love her skin. And like how that has an effect with my daughter is mixed. So her dad is half black and she has exact skin tone. So she's very like caramely and gets super tan. And I never notice certain things. Like she's 6 and she would get a doll and she's like, Mom, this Barbie has my skin. And it was like a Barbie that was like way darker than her, which was funny. But like that's how she like saw herself. And I'm like, yeah, she's so beautiful. And like we make sure, like, even with all the models that we have, we constantly are like, oh, she's gorgeous. And there's no conversation about size, there's no conversation about skin. Like everybody's getting the same commentary. And so because of that, when she picks dolls and she picks toys, they happen to be diverse also. So you're like, there's a connection to that too, where we grew up only seeing blonde white women. I still didn't see anyone that looks like me, and I'm Caucasian. So I cannot imagine how that must have felt for the vast majority of women who are ethnic. I'm like, it's just shocking to not even see yourself at all, let alone like not seeing someone that kind of looks like you. I mean, it was all white women represented. So it's just about, I think, compassion and consciousness where you can really have empathy to put yourself in someone else's shoes really fully. And I think when you have diverse groups of women and people around you that you talk to and you listen and you hear their stories and you really like pause to put yourself in that position, like when they win, you feel that too. We're like, oh, we did it. Like we did something for humanity in this one. Like, and they cry when they see their photos and you see little girls looking at their photos. And so with a lot of the like stuff in our industry, you deal with a lot of egos, you deal with a lot of just like personalities, and that's the draining part on the internal side.
Yeah.
But the external side is the whole point behind doing it. Is it's not about the few on the inside, it's about the amount of people that see an image that you helped put out into the world, that it affects and put a ripple effect outward. And so it's bigger than that. So it's that, to me, has always been my focus. And I think that's why we continue to evolve, because I listen very closely and I'm very in tune with what women are saying and what the pulse is of what we want and what young girls are saying and what they want. They want one group. They don't want to be labeled and separated any longer. So as long as they're driving that, and consumers will continue to drive the market, that will be the future because of them.
Absolutely. And so being on the forefront of trends as you are, you started the Game Changers board.
Yes.
Okay. You want to tell everybody about that?
Yeah. So the game changers. So this is like the next thing that I really see when it comes to marketing. So because everything is so saturated with influencers and fake images and fake personalities, and like, influencers in the wild is like the funniest page ever because it's ridiculous and we all know it. So it's about acknowledging that anyone can pretend now because they've been given a template that's really easy to copy, no matter what it is. You can literally copy any kind of persona because you can just follow what someone else has done. And then that's like a mass copy paste. So authenticity is actually very rare. And it's very noticeable now when you come across it, because everything else is such a facade and people tend to lose their authenticity because they're really curating themselves so heavily. So when they look at marketing and marketing value, beauty, you're like, yeah, okay, but it's getting boring. It just is. Everyone has the same face. Everybody's getting the same plastic surgery. Everybody's doing the same filters. Everyone does their makeup the same. I'm like, I know I'm like getting old, but there's certain celebrities. I'm like, who's that? I thought that was that other girl. Like they look exactly the same. Like, no, that's so-and-so. I'm like, okay, this is getting difficult for me to tell the difference. Like it's strange. So with branding, and you're like, you have to come up with something different every season, every campaign you want to try to get some kind of attention for. You put a lot of money into it for marketing, and you want to have an outcome that brings value to the brand. And value is no longer coming from aesthetics only. And that's what you were talking about, where value is coming from people and coming from authenticity that not everyone can fake. So brands are going to always have models that sell, like, the products, which is fine. But there's also going to be a new wave where they're going to need storytellers that are going to be like, hey, this person does this, and this, and she's awesome and she's funny. And you're seeing stuff like that, comedians getting campaigns, and like, because they're funny and they're doing something totally different than what people have done in marketing before for women, and having a different approach to the same stuff. Like it is refreshing. So there's a more opportunity than ever before for people to go out and be game changers, even if you don't have a lot of following. Like, that's misguided too. It doesn't matter how many followers you have if the work you do is genuine and authentic and powerful. That's what the value is going to be when partnering with a brand. So it's not there yet, but you'll start to notice more and more brands are doing that. Like you said, they're using normal people that are cool. Like, we used one, I think it was a Dickies ad, and it was like this producer, this like guy that was also a skater, and he had this like big curly hair, and he was Mexican and lives in LA, and he wears Dickies, and it was like a real guy who would totally wear that, and he looked cool wearing it, and this was his work, and this is like what he does for a living, and they were featuring that. And it's like, you can't fake that with a model. And you look at that progression, same thing with like movies, and who are all the leads in movies, like especially the high school movies. It was all like models who are like 30 but playing high school kids.
Yeah.
And you're like, it loses something. There's something that you're like, where's the Victoria's Secret time where you're like, everyone wanted to be that? We see that now, and it's like, you kind of do an eye roll. And so you really are starting to see like non-traditional leads being cast in shows and movies that wouldn't ever normally be cast as leads. And those shows are doing really well. And the writing is getting super funny because it's a different perspective that none of us have been exposed to, but we're relating to in a way. We're like, yeah, I have a friend who's just like that. And I do that too. And so we're really realizing like looks have been telling a very specific story that is not real. And I think you've probably experienced that when you get judged for the way you look, or people make assumptions about you after the way you look. It happens to me all the time. And they're like, you're not all what I thought you were going to be like. And I was like, oh, much better. And they're like, yeah, no, but I was like, sorry, that I just have intense features that can make me look mean, but I promise I'm not. Like, so it's just kind of funny how people are really taken aback if you're kind and they happen to think that you're attractive, or you don't care about aesthetics as much because modeling's your job. But like, when you're not modeling, you're like a normal person who wears sweatpants and like doesn't wear makeup. Like, that's real. That's real life. And so I think there's value to that. And I think people really appreciate it. And it makes it a more welcoming experience to shop from someone who's honest and funny and isn't perfect and is okay with existing. There's something really valuable there. And I think that's going to be the future.
I'm curious, if your daughter came to you one day and said, Mommy, I want to be a model, what would your reaction be?
Oh my gosh. Well, she is quite the little actress. So she tells me she wants to do acting, and I'm like, and she's so fun. So it's really hard as I'm stuttering because she's grown up around it.
Yeah.
And she's really good at modeling. So she's modeled with me a bunch for like Old Navy and different things. And they're like, oh my God, she's like a pro. I'm like, well, she's literally grown up watching it. It's like kids who have like a professional soccer player as a parent, and then they're pro at like 8. You're like, yeah, it's unfair. She gets like professional like exposure from the time she could walk. So she does it so naturally. And I ask her, I'll be like, oh, do you want to be a model? And she's like, no. She
I'm
does
too smart
model.
for that now.
Yeah, she does model, but she's so like, no, I want to do acting. And I'm like, oh, okay. So like every night she'll do this thing where she's like, she loves to like make people laugh and perform. So we just did a casting video together actually yesterday. And this is what I was talking about. It was shitty lighting. It was like a snowstorm and they needed it. And I was like, okay, the house isn't like perfectly put together. I'm like, whatever. I'm just going to film it. And it's just going to be, I go, we'll get style points. And again, being yourself is always like so much more valuable. So we sat down with her and I was like, okay, she loves to make up knock knock jokes. So I'm like, okay, let's do some knock knock jokes. And she's like, okay, knock knock. And I'm like, who's there? She's like, lemons. I'm like, lemons who? She's like, time to squeeze my lemons. I'm like, what? And I was like, where'd so she just makes stuff up by what she looks at. So then she's like, knock knock. And I'm like, who's there? And she's like, snowman, because we had a snowman salt and pepper shaker. And she's like, I go, snowman who? She's like, snowman melts. And then she's like cracking up. So we put that in our video. We like jumped over the couch and rolled on the floor. And we like, it just funny stuff like that, because kids are the best representation as models and actors because they don't have self-judgment or self-criticism. They do it. They just fully commit and they're just fully doing it. And I'm like, wow. So I really study her like that. And I learn a lot like from her, but I definitely do not ever, I think when you're in the industry as a parent, you have a different viewpoint where you're not trying to live vicariously through her. So you're making sure that anything she wants to do is 100% because she wants to do it. You don't need the validation for it. So you're literally like, she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to do it. So that's kind of how we go with it. But yeah, I'm letting her kind of decide. And when I was pregnant with her, people would be like, oh my gosh, she's going to be so gorgeous. I bet she's going to be a model. And I'd be like, well, she's a fetus. So maybe we should let her be born first and then let her decide what she would like to do. Like, but also look at the pressure already before she's born. She already has pressure to be beautiful. And I'm like, so I'm very mindful of that in letting her decide that she can do anything that she wants. And if that's a part of it, she can do that. And she can do 9 other things too. It doesn't have to be, this is your one thing. So as long as it's something that she's passionate about, I'm here to support whatever that is. So, but she's 6, so she's still got time.
Time. Yeah.
She's funny though. She's really funny. She's got like adult humor. And I'm like, oh, she's been hanging out with me like way too long. But she makes people like crack up and they're like, do not expect certain things to come out of her mouth. So she's always cracking us up. And I love her so much. But that's also like the passion behind the work is, it's her generation that is going to bear the fruits of our labor, of all this hard struggle to make these shifts happen. It's her generation that are really going to get to take it and become something different. And I think that's like, we got to keep our minds there to say, we're still work in progress. We had a lot to deprogram. We had a lot to work through. We're still working through it. And that's okay. We don't ever have to feel like we're fully healed from it because it was, it's encoded in us, but we can overcome it. We can continue to show up and question it and battle it and feed ourselves and nourish ourselves in every way, shape, and form. And then to really sit back and watch how different that they are, our children, and really let them be our teachers now to go, okay, I'm giving them what I didn't get. And now I'm going to also learn from them because we're not stomping out their individuality. We're not teaching them to be anything other than themselves. And there's such a beautiful lesson in there for us to learn those things now from them, which is like full circle, really amazing.
For sure. Well, Katie Willcox, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for letting me be part of the Natural Model Management family. And
this is just the beginning for us. We have to do so many things together. 2023 is our year. We're going to kick something off. I can feel it.
Katie, thank you so much for joining today.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Human Beauty Movement podcast. Be sure to follow, rate, and review us wherever you stream podcasts. The Human Beauty Movement is a community-based platform that cultivates the beauty of humankind. Check out our workshops, find us on social media, and share our inspiration with all the beautiful humans in your life. Learn more at thehumanbeautymovement.com. Thank you so much for being a beautiful human.